What's up, guys? Before we get on with today's video, I want to take a quick second and tell you guys about 4748 flex plates. This flex plate here next to me is a factory flex plate from a 4748. They are a stamped steel material. You will notice that they have these big windows cut out in them. Anything really above 400 horsepower, especially if you're doing burnouts for four-wheel drive launches, these flex plates will actually break. They'll crack and break between these windows here. So you need to upgrade to a billet flex plate. Not all billet flex plates are created equal. There are some flex plates out there on the market that are not even billet. And although they are an upgrade to this flex plate here, they don't give you the protection that a true billet flex plate does. So any of my builds above an entry level 2.0 gets this flex plate right here. This is a Gearin billet flex plate. You can see that it doesn't have much material between the windows. These things are SFI approved, so you can run them in your race truck. And any build I do, 500 horsepower and above, gets this flex plate right here. Now, onward with your video. What's up, guys? Logan here with Logan Built. Today's video is another one of those request videos. I had a friend of mine hit me up and he was asking me a couple questions on how he should mount the bed sides on his truck. Asked me a couple different questions about gutted beds and stuff like that. And I said, you know what? This is a topic that I actually get asked a lot about. And this is a topic that I see a lot of people ask a lot about. So I happen to have a couple different trucks in my possession that all have gutted beds, you could say. And they're all done in a different way. So I think I could make a little video and show you guys the different ways that you can mount bed sides and you can gut the bed and stuff like that in your truck, and kind of give you guys an idea of what to do. So I am going to show you guys a couple trucks. So this truck behind me is Jordan Newman's truck, the truck that I've been doing the common rail swap on and all the work to. I've done a bunch of work to this truck, including setting up the bed, gutting the bed, and all that stuff. So I'll show you how I did it on this particular truck to start with. So Jordan wanted to be able to save as much weight as possible, but he was still going for a particular look, and he wanted his tailgate to be on there, and he wanted his tailgate to be functioning. So in order for that to be possible, the back of the bed area here needed to be really strong between the tailgate, like it was from the factory, so there wouldn't be any issues with the tailgate causing any problems opening and close it with either of the bed sides. So because this is a factory frame vehicle, we were able to leave this back factory crossmember section that runs across here. We were able to leave that intact, so it actually bolts, the back of this bed bolts into the stock location, and then I notched the cross member here in the center to clear his fuel cell and battery tray and that stuff. He also wanted to sheet the top of this bed. When we're done, we will have some sort of sheeting on top of the bed here. So knowing that, when I made this bed, I used some light gauge angle iron, and I made this perimeter frame that goes all the way up to the front and has a piece in the middle, and that's for whatever we sheet it with is going to be broke right there in the center, so we needed some support there. And so not only did that help really tie in the structure of the top of the bed, but it also gave me the ability to run some stiffening tubes from the top of the angle down to the wheel well and then down to the bottom, making the actual bedside really strong. So I did that on both sides, and I did that in the front on both of these as well. And then I put these tabs on it. There's a tab on the frame and there's a tab on that tube, and there will actually be a tie bar that goes in here and it bolts in, and it keeps that bedside really, really stiff. So that way it can't really flex. You can get a good view of that here. So you can see where that tie bar is bolted into this bed, and this bed is rock solid now because of that. And then in the front, since we were going for a particular look, we wanted this to look like a factory bed from the outside. I left the factory bed where it ties the two bed sides together, and then I cut that, and I actually put a thin gauge piece of square tube that fit really nicely up inside of here, in this channel, and I welded that in, so that made these two bed sides really strong together. And then after tying in this perimeter frame to it, this thing is really, really stout. So that's how I tied the front together. And then tying it to the frame, I ran a 5/8 piece of chromoly tubing that has brackets that bolt to both sides of the bed. And then I have these kicker 5/8 tubes that come down, so it really triangulates the force. And this bed, you can grab it and shake it and do whatever you want, and it is a part of the truck now. There's nothing that really bothers me worse that when you're shooting for a look like this, having a bedside that is floppy, or any sort of deflection, especially when you leave the starting line. There's some times when that doesn't matter, but when you're going for a particular look like this truck is, that was something that was really important to me. I would have started with just 2 bedsides on this truck, and I probably would have made everything else. But luckily these were really clean, nice rust-free bedsides, and nobody makes a steel bedside for a first gen, so I was kind of stuck with having to cut this whole bed apart. And Jordan actually did a lot of the grunt work for me. I told him where to cut, and he cut the majority of it out, and then I finished it all. So cut the whole front of it out, so that way we could do rear down bars there. That way Tin Soldier could put those in, and try to make this thing as light as possible, but while still maintaining the look that we're going for with the functioning tailgate and the cover on the top. So when you look at this truck from the outside, when it's all said and done, it will look like a truck. That was a big reason for the 25/4 cage in this, is so that way there was no rear down bars coming out of the back glass and into the bed. So this thing will be very seemingly appearing as a truck. So now that I've showed you a gutted bed, how it's mounted on a full frame truck, I'm going to show you how I did it on my tube chassis truck here. So I did this a little unconventional from how most people would do their bedsides, and really I was going for a certain look, and that's the only reason that you would want to do it this way, I suppose. As you can see, I have 1 5/8" tube chassis, and I wanted to be able to put a tailgate on it if I chose. As you can see, I chose not to, but I wanted it to be strong enough for that. And the big thing that I wanted is I wanted the factory inside of the bed look. So when I cut this thing apart, I actually, if you cut a bed apart, there's normally nothing below about right here in front and the rear of the bed, but I wanted this to be a complete panel. So I actually finished out the bottom of the inside of the bed on here, and really all that did was just add weight to the truck. So if you're super weight conscious, I wouldn't do that, but I really liked the way that it finished it out. It made it super, super strong. And I still did save weight because I was able to get rid of the entire bed. But honestly, I would have left the whole bed in this truck if I could have figured out a way to do it to where it would have looked good. This was also my first tube chassis job that I ever did, so I wanted people to kind of be able to see it and stuff, because, you know, it was something that I was proud of. So I'm pretty happy with the way that this turned out overall, but definitely not the lightest way to do it. And then, so when I did this, I cut out, unlike on Newman's, how we still have the factory bed pieces here, I cut all of that out. My roll pan is welded on, so that helps strengthen it up. And then I put a piece of square tube in across here where the factory would have been. And then I just use that to mount it to my main tubes on the chassis here on each side. And because of the way that I did this bedside, all essentially one piece of steel on the inside, I didn't have to do any kickers off of the corners of the wheel well. This thing was plenty strong enough the way it was to not have any flex there. And then in the front, I did the same thing like I did on Newman's. I put a piece of thin wall square tube inside of this factory channel here, welded it in, and then used that to come off of for mounts onto the actual frame rail on both sides. So there's technically only 4 mounting points on this entire bed. I'm sorry, that's a lie. There's 4 mounting points at the top of the bed. Underneath, to make sure that I had enough strength. Let me see if I can get it where you guys can see it. I did this same square tube deal like before, and I actually put a piece of square tube tubing into this frame structure here, and I welded it all in so it was nice and really strong. And then I ran that over to a mount that I have on my chassis side. So there's 2 bolts that hold this in. So essentially this shares the weight of the bottom side of the bed, and then the top shares the weight of the top side of the front of the bed. And so with doing it all that way, I was able to not have to do any sort of framing at the top here. I was able to leave all of this exposed the way that I wanted to do it, and I was still able to make it really, really super, super strong. This bed doesn't have any flex at all when I launched the truck or anything, so I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It took me a ton of time to do this. I don't know if I would do it again because of all the time that I had in it. I had to custom make all of those rounded pieces in the corner, and that it just took a lot of time doing all the metal and body work on this. So not sure I would do it again. Definitely not the lightest way to do it, but it definitely nailed it on the execution of the look that I was going for. A neat thing to me, at least, that I was able to do with the way that I did these bedsides is if you look at this truck, you won't see any fuel lines. There's no fuel lines ran on the frame. There's no battery cables ran on the outside of the frame. There's no air to water lines. Everything is really, really super clean looking. And that is because of this outer piece that I made. I was able to run everything through the bed. So all of my air to water lines are actually through the bed. They come out of the side of the bed behind the front of the transmission cooler there. And then the fuel lines are the same way. If you can see, I ran those into the bed here, and they run out in front of the radiator. So it was just a really, really super clean way to do it. Like I said, it's heavy, but it was the look that I wanted, and it turned out really good, I think. So I showed you how to do it on a full frame. I showed you a way of doing it on a tube frame. Now I'm gonna show you the, in my opinion, the lightest way to do this on a tube frame truck. So this is JP's truck, and the way that him and Corey Dow executed this was unlike anything that I had ever seen before. The front mounts on this thing, it's so simple that it just blows your mind. But on the back here, you can see they used 3/4 inch, I think it's 058 wall tubing, really thin stuff. And they just have a tube that mounts these 2 bedsides, the top and bottom of the bedside. These are glass bedsides. And then there's another tube that runs across the back of the chassis here with these little saddles, and then it's pinned in, so it's really easy to remove this bed, honestly. And then that takes care of the entire back structure of the bed right there. And then he has these kickers, really small, thin gauge, 1/4 inch material, that tubing that comes off, and it mounts to the corner, mounts over your wheel well, so it keeps all nice and square on all that stuff. It doesn't have a bunch of shake or anything to that. And then the same kicker deal in the front, and all of this stuff is triangulated, so it's super strong. It all actually pins on in the front there. Never really, I've had the bedsides off of this thing one time, but really, we've never really had the bedsides off, so I wouldn't say making them pin in is a super big deal. But the way that all this is done is super light. And then in the front, this is just so simple. In the front here, it's hard to tell, but essentially there is a bracket with a tube in it, and then same at the bottom, a bracket and a tube in it. And this tube has a hole drilled in through the cab, and it passes through there and there, and then on the inside of the cab there's a pin that just pins it in, and that is all that holds the front of this bed on. There, in my opinion, there is no way to do it lighter than that. I've never seen anybody do it like that before, and I really don't know if anybody's really done it since, which I don't know why, because it's super crazy light to do it that way. We actually have a set of steel bed sides down there for this truck eventually. And when I do the steel bed sides, it will get all mounted in the exact same fashion. The only difference is I'm going to basically copy this structure over, but instead of doing it out of 3/4, I'm probably going to do it either out of 1 inch or 1.25 inch, really light stuff. Just to take up these fiberglass bed sides are pretty light, and when I put steel on there, I want to make sure that we have enough support on the back of this thing. And that way too, if he ever wants to swap back and forth from glass to steel bed sides, essentially all of this bracketry will stay with these fiberglass bed sides, and it would be a swap that we could do really easily with it. And then when I do the steel bed sides, I won't need a kicker off of the top on either side of this. I'll just need one at the bottom, kind of like how I showed you on Jordan's truck. And that's because the steel bed side has a lot more rigidity in the wheel arch area. So this is definitely, in my opinion, the lightest way to mount either glass or steel bed sides to a tube chassis truck. Okay, so showed you guys a couple different trucks. Keep in mind that this is one of those things that there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's no necessarily right way to do it. There's no necessarily wrong way to do it. There's definitely ways to do it lighter than other options and stuff like that. But generally speaking, I feel like those 3 trucks will give you guys a good idea of how you want to do it with your truck. Something like this is kind of where you get to be creative and you get to do your own thing. There's no rules behind it. There's nobody tells you have to do it a certain way. So these are just 3 different styles. I don't think they are the end-all be-alls per se, just the way that we did it. As far as opinions go, man, I don't like anything that has big tubing holding the bed sides up, especially if you just have 2 bed sides and your goal is light. I just cannot fathom 1 3/8, 1.5 inch, 1 5/8. I've even seen 1 3/4 tubing holding bed sides up. If you're just holding 2 bed sides up, like the steel bed sides we have for JP's truck, they're 40 pounds a piece. That's not justifiable to me to have an 1 5/8 tube. I don't care if it's 058 wall. It's a big tube. I don't personally like the way it looks. Hey, if that's how you have it on your truck and that's the way you want it for a certain reason, cool. It's just, if you're gonna try to build something as light as possible, and if you're watching this video to try to figure out the way to do it as light as possible, it is of my opinion that that is not the way. I would rather go with smaller tubing, especially where you don't need the bigger tubing. Now, keep in mind that you can underbuild one of these. If you don't build it heavy enough, then yeah, when you let go of the trans brake or you launch the truck or whatever, you know, the thing might fall apart. So don't build everything out of 1/4 inch tubing because you're trying to make it as light as possible. You have to kind of use some, some smarts here to think about, okay, what force is this experiencing? How can I make this light enough but still make it strong enough? Like I said in the video, the way that I did my bed is absolutely not the lightest way. It is not something I would recommend if that's what your goal is. I just did it because that's the way I think it looks cool. The way that we did Newman's bed, I feel like it worked out pretty good. If I had to do it all over again, I probably would have mounted the front of the bed the same way that JP did on his, just because I think that's still the lightest option. But on his, our big concern was make it strong. You know, that truck has really nice paint on it. Didn't want anything tore up, didn't want any paint getting into paint or any of that. Make it strong and make it to where we can cover the top of it and keep light as possible in mind with it. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and hopefully that this video just helped you guys get a better idea of some of the options. So like always guys, I appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next one.